it's weird that I kind of apologize, but it almost, when I think about it, also sounds silly too. Because there is some part of us that we're all still on this journey together.
Correct.
And as long as
Yes.
we approach all of this stuff with an air of respect and the willingness to understand, then there should be gray area in order to make those missteps in the all for the purpose of improving, to spread love and understanding. Right? Never
Yes.
to belittle you as a person or anybody that anybody that identifies differently, like that. So that's where I want to start, and that's where I want to start for my audience. Like, I don't know what I'm inviting in my comment section on this video, because this will be a video and this will be public, but I will not be a part of that argument. This video is that argument.
Right.
That's all I have to say for the viewers. But I want to start with a question that I got.
Awesome.
Pronouns seem to be important.
Yes.
Why do you think there's so much pushback with pronouns? What do you think that you yourself have to lose by just throwing your hands up and say, fuck it, you can call me whatever, fuck whatever I want. Like, I know I live in this society and this shit's too complicated. Like, what do you stand to lose by giving up that fight?
I think it's just a good boundary. I mean, we all have the ability to define who we are, period. And one of the things about being on a journey of self-identity is that as you discover those pieces and parts of yourself, you can solidify that for other people to relate to. And when things are amorphous, like you said, it's hard to know who you're dealing with, how you're dealing with them, what is the way in which you deal with them. But once a person defines themselves, they're clear on who they are. And I think that once that's defined and you express that to the world, it's not anybody else's position to yes or no that for you. And so I think oftentimes pronoun use is just about respect. If you understand the grand scheme of what this experience really embodies, it's an experience that's unique to me. I'm not trying to recreate your experience. I can only live through this experience. And understanding that it's a separate life and separate experience is really good. But oftentimes people don't associate you as a unique individual. They see you trying to take away something from them. And I'm not really sure where we get that. I think maybe some of it comes from our cultural identity that we share. But I also don't want us to lose our sense of individuality in that, because no one is cookie cutter, not even of this experience. Everybody has a different experience. Everybody decides on different things physically to define themselves. And so, no one can really define that except the individual.
So what does a pronoun give you that your name doesn't?
I think it's an affirmation of the spirit. The body doesn't affirm who I am in spirit. And so this journey is about aligning what my spirit is with my physical appearance and allowing me to not be internally oppressed by my physical appearance. A big part of the earliest piece of this journey for me when I started therapy was to decipher between, is the oppression that I feel rooted externally from society and all these other things that we experience, or is the oppression internal in that I am trying to fit into something that someone else is telling me I'm supposed to be? And it took a really long time for me to see that I was trying to fit into something else, and that walking in this way actually gave me freedom. And that has been immeasurable. The experience of the release that I feel, the exhale that I've had and continue to have as I walk through the process, has been its own affirmation. So
I can relate on a small scale with that feeling. I said I wouldn't bring this up, but we live in a society where being a Christian is the default, and there are preconceived notions about people that don't fall within that box. Specifically about morality, oftentimes, like what does an atheist? How does an atheist have morality if they don't have like a God to like tell them what to do? And so I find that the more when I came out atheist, because you do come out whenever you feel the need to hide yourself, especially when you are a minority in some way or how you identify. Like, for instance, we may never see, maybe for not another 50 years, an open atheist president. I think that we'll see a gay president before we see an atheist president. I think that's how fundamental Christianity is to the United States.
yes.
Right? I'm not saying that atheists have it worse than the LGBT community by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm saying is, for someone to talk to an atheist, having believed their whole life that there is a God and cannot see anything any other way, that resonates with gender roles and how society works. When someone is told, one man, one woman, babies, that unit is the most structurally sound social unit that we have, and that's how we build society. And any other thing is counter to that, is a deviation from that. Then I can see why you can get pushback for just trying to be who you are, because who you are is a blatant dispute to what they believe in.
That's right.
And that's hard to deal with.
Yes. And I think that's kind of funny, because for me, that makes it easy to deal with.
How so?
Because people can talk about what they believe all day, but I'm living the experience. I'm literally living it, moment to moment, for what it is and how it unwinds, unfolds, the things that I have to learn in it, the detoxifying that I have to do in it, all of those things. I'm living the experience. So it's kind of made my need to argue people's beliefs moot. I don't really need to.
That's fair. How do you talk to somebody that comes to you this way? Personally, that's great for you, and I'm great, and I'm glad that you're happy. But I think that if more and more people do that, it could be bad for society in general. That your happiness specifically does not translate as to happiness for society.
Oh.
Like, what would you say to that person?
I would say that's an interesting opinion. I mean, that's jumping to a conclusion based on something that you don't have any proof of.
Well, okay. So the proof, I don't agree with this. I want to say that for the record.
Yeah.
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, let's argue. Let's go.
I'm just playing devil's advocate here. So please don't crucify me.
Sure.
But history. Like, I already know how I would refute this argument. I just want to hear you, because you could come from a completely different perspective.
Sure.
Like, history, like, it's always been this way. That tradition, like, argument.
What's always been what way?
Like, mother, father, child.
Yes.
Like, let's say that they in their perfect world of nostalgia, the LGBT community has only started to exist in the 80s. Like, the AIDS pandemic.
Oh my gosh.
You see what I'm saying?
So
like
hilarious.
Reaganites and their and their ilk.
I'm going to challenge it. And I'm going to challenge it by saying that, what was missing out of history in terms of LGBT relationships, we see it documented in the Bible. It's just what we see is a form of power over some extreme age distance or age gap in relationship, and a lack of any kind of relational quality. It is a power exchange in the Bible. So what I'm saying is homosexuality has existed. I also do believe transness existed back then, but what I think it lacked was the ability to be defined in words and put in print. And so what we do know about the Bible is that it was a codified society. Everything was about the rules, and we need the rules and the structure to make sense.
Right.
And so, but it doesn't make sense if man is not in control, and these are the structures that serve man.
Right.
And so,
Man is in the default maleness, or
correct,
okay.
correct. Default male.
Because we're still in a situation where when people say mankind versus humans, like,
No.
or you know what I'm saying? So
Not mankind, like men,
Right.
like societally.
Right.
And I think that that was the beginning of structures and systems that are meant to serve them particularly. So I think that the way that people cling to its original print and what they think is the original translation of something, when there's so many translations of so many different things, and then also the fact that the Bible contradicts itself. It can't be the supreme authority. I think that we have to look beyond that and understand more than one culture, more than one level of existence and societies of beings, to know that it has existed, probably almost as long as the earth and people. However, because there was a lack of reproduction, maybe there wasn't an awareness of that. Or
that makes sense. Okay, we're going into the territory that I was trying to avoid.
I'm
fine with that.
Okay.
I just want to know why, because in my brain, I just want to make sure that our bases are covered.
Sure.
So once you start looking at other cultures and watching how they do things differently, how do you then define what goodness is? Because so I had this conversation actually earlier today. Let's talk about arranged marriages. I think that's a great sort of cultural divide to talk about. We're free in this country to basically marry whoever, but there are different familial ties in other countries. It's so much that the parents have an obligation to the child to give them a good match, right? And if a mother and a father are properly incentivized to think about what's best for their child, wouldn't that, with people with life experience and experience in those relationships, wouldn't there be a greater likelihood for success if things like marriage arrangements were left up to the people that know them probably better than they know themselves at that age, and just know more about life in general?
I could not definitively say that is true, because it just depends on what you're arranging. Some people do want financial security. They want a continuation of their family line. They want a good pedigree.
Sure.
For their offspring and their generations to come. And then some people want their heart to be content.
Right.
And so it just depends on the person. What do they value more? And some people need to, there may be those 1 in a million parents that are just so awesome that they're gonna pick out the person who gives their child the best of everything, and also someone who makes their heart content. But even in doing that, will that person feel like they have the ability to do that on their own, or make those decisions on their own? I think it's gonna be some lack somewhere.
There has to be lack somewhere, which is why I sort of tried to leave the analogy with people that had their best interests of their children at heart, because I am fully aware that there are parents that want more that their name and what they built specifically be preserved through all time. I understand that. More so, is it better? Is it merely better for a person to go out there? Because we when we're talking about the freedom to marry whoever we want to marry, we also have to leave room for the fact that people may not know what they want themselves.
Right.
And have the ability, and often do, because the divorce rate shows this, that they choose poorly.
Yeah.
And so the only thing for this argument is it necessarily true that a person can make a better decision than their parents? I know.
I mean, of course, a parent could make a better decision But
Okay, can I rephrase my question?
sure.
Is the decision better or worse merely because it is their person's own? Like how much, because we live in a Western, quote, Western country, we cherish freedom.
Yes, we
right?
do.
And so we put a value on that says, look, I may have messed up, but at least it was my choice.
Yes.
Right? That actually
Yes.
says no utility to what the consequences were or
Right.
anything like that. We have freedom, and we use it as a value for its own sake, regardless of the consequences.
Mhm.
And I'm not quite sure if that is a net positive 100% of the time.
I don't know that it's authentic to an individual's experience. Right? So I feel like if this is my experience, there's got to be a reason why the universe draws certain things in people unto me. So that's my authentic experience, regardless of what it is, success or failure. That's my authentic experience. That's made for me. So I'm supposed to learn, gain something from that. And having someone else choose what that experience is, I don't think that person gets to develop the understanding of the intuitiveness of their own spirit.
That's to you, that's very similar to the society saying that you should be a certain way.
True.
That's
what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like, I mean, you can believe what you want. You can feel what you want. Every day I wake up, I feel the same.
Right.
And I have to live authentically in what is best for me.
Sure.
So, and that's what I've chosen. And once I made the decision to choose that and to define that for myself, you know, whether or not I can convince everybody to be on my page or not is really not as important as being able to continue the purpose that I've been set on and to function in professionalism and with respect, you know, to continue to work with my colleagues as I do, and to continue to walk through new ways to innovate this conversation. Because I think sometimes we get stuck in what we know because it's old information. And even though we think we're being our best selves today, a lot of times our best selves are still operating on old information.
Right.
And so we just have to be willing to accept that there's new information, that the evidence of it is in front of you, you know?
But the evidence, because I'm trying to establish a values core.
Okay.
And it seems like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the conversation is geared towards authenticity and personal experience, probably because you live in a society where it's hammered in for you to be something else. Mm-hmm. So the thing that you have to fight for is the thing that you cherish and you hold on to.
Yes.
I don't see authenticity as the same way, because I, apart from the trivial comparison that I said earlier, haven't had to do that in the same way you have.
Right.
And so I tend to think about things more scientifically. What I have to do in order for me to understand how I can communicate, because so this is for how I can communicate this to people that are more like me. Mm-hmm. Like, this isn't for people like you. Mm-hmm. Like, this isn't for your community. Your community gets it. Mm-hmm. Right? This is for people that I probably will have to talk to. Mm-hmm. You get to leave my channel.
Right.
Like, I will probably have conversations about this conversation. And so I want to, so stop, please forgive me if I stop you a couple of times, because all I'm trying to do is understand the right way, I guess. Because even saying this, like, you're a human being that, and like, you deserve all the happiness and you deserve to be called whatever you want to be called, that's basic skimming the surface level shit, which actually doesn't address nothing. It allows me,
and it's actually slightly condescending.
Correct, because obviously you're those things, right?
Correct.
It allows whoever says things like that to basically put those thoughts on the back burner, like they're done, like they've done something. So
what it does for me is it allows me to identify who is led by their bias and who would be willing to overcome their bias.
So
So
we talk, because I do want to pivot towards race, but I actually really love where the conversation is right now. When you talk about bias, I see that more as middle of the road bias. Like, it's not obvious hate for me. Like, because like I was saying off camera, that thing that I was trying to confront was obvious hate. That to me is like low-hanging fruit of shit to deal with.
Sure.
Right? The hardest shit is always trying to figure out blind spots that you don't even know that you have. Right?
Yes.
And so let's go down a little deeper.
Sure.
Let's go down past the obvious points of your humanity and all of that stuff. When it comes to gender, how do you look at that, and how has my complacency or the acceptance of my maleness blinding me to the bigger picture?
Well, gender is, not just the binary experience that people think it is.
Right.
Yes, you can be born with a certain sex organ and be aligned in that sex organ, or you could be born with more than one sex organ, or you could share multiple characteristics from various quote-unquote traits of different
I'm sorry,
genders.
this is going so well. I want to make sure that this is running, because if I miss any of this, I'm not gonna forgive myself.
Okay. So I think because we don't even understand the multiplicity of just birth and how those experiences are happening that early, it's very easy for us to just approach things with this is the way it should be, so it's this or this. Gender for me is a multiplicity of things, because as an educator, I've had the beauty of living in classrooms and working in classrooms with a plethora of children who might have been, the majority of the classroom was African American, and I've got, a pretty even mix of boys and girls, but each one of them has just this amazing little different personality and little nuance of who they are, and all of them have different gifts, and you see different things play out and you see different traits play out. Never would I want to suggest to them, well, you're a girl, so this is what you should think about. Or you're a boy, and so this is how you should approach life. No, that's not how I would want to stimulate them, but a lot of African American culture does that.
Absolutely.
You're a man, so you have to absolutely, have a backbone. You can't take any stuff. No, don't show your feelings, blah, blah, blah. Well, you're a woman, so you need to be smart, and you need to make sure that you're pretty, and you also need to make sure that boys like you, and that you don't talk too much, and that you don't threaten anybody or don't make too much money. There's so many rules of conformity.
Right.
And so my experience over these last, I'm gonna be 45 years old next month, over these last few months and really starting to get a clear picture is that everybody is just so incredibly unique. But when we talk about gender, like being a man is on a spectrum. It's a spectrum. There are manly men. There are not so manly men. There are intellectual men. There are feminine men. There are trans men.
I'm sorry, when you say feminine men, you're talking still about societal standards and outlooks.
Yes,
okay.
Like they still have a male body. They dress like a man in society and operate like a man in society, but they have a feminine spirit.
Sure.
There's some mixture of all of those, and none of that is speaking to what is their sexual attraction. I'm just speaking to, who they are as a person.
So let me show you where I was coming from, because now that we're labeling things, once I started to really kind of think about the spectrum, and some of the things that we're talking about, being emotionally strong but sensitive in the correct like contexts is a trait that a human being should have.
Yes.
Being confident in yourself and being competent to do what you need to do. These are so every man or woman trait that I've ever seen is positive. Being a homemaker, being a provider, all of those things to me, like even though they have been sexed, to me should be gender neutral.
Yes.
Like the more I examine like certain traits, strength, sensitivity,
yes,
all of these things should be human traits. I don't understand. Like I see how they got sexed, but I'm starting to really kind of war against labels like masculine and feminine, and that puts me in conflict of people. To me, it might not, but so help me sort through this. Whenever you say, you know, you're dressed the way that you dress, you know, you have a great shirt on. I love that shirt.
Thanks,
I actually like those shoes even more.
Oh, thank you.
Denim has not been my thing, but you look good in it. Maybe if I lose a little bit more weight, I'll go for it. If you start to claim things that you feel comfortable in the way that you, in the things that you wear, apart from like, you don't feel comfortable in other things. I look at that. Well, why is that sexed? Why are your shoes sexed? Why is that shirt sexed? Why is that gendered at all? Like, why are these things? Why are we addressing each other in those terms? What, like, I understand why there has to be pronouns where we are. Like, it's almost the colorblind thing that we deal with as Black people. This whole, why can't we all be the same? Well, we don't have the same fucking history, obviously, right? But there has to be some general understanding that, like, you know, poor whites and Blacks have a lot more in common than they have differences, but they have things. But you, only one of those groups of people were weaponized against slaves,
right?
You know, and so there's all.
I got something for this, and now that I'm hearing you cuss, I might get a little colloquial.
No, it's fine.
So I think people are basic. Basic bitchery is a lot of the motivation behind why this conversation is part of the narrative. People approach all the time. Aren't you gonna confuse people? I had literally somebody the other day in my parking lot. Well, considering that I'm not someone who every time I go to the grocery store, 17 women want to hit on me and don't, you know, want to be surprised by the fact that I don't have a natural born penis, is my daily experience. I don't think, no, I'm not going to confuse anybody. I think it's a sick and toxic narrative. And I think that's part of those things that stimulates the oppression that we experience. These pre-constructed narratives, the fact that people don't want to evolve in life beyond, can you really literally not tell the difference between a cis-born person and a trans person? And then if you could or could not, isn't that your issue because you're approaching that person in the situation? That's your issue.
So I have to tell you about this. I have to tell you about this because you hit the nail. I didn't even tell you what that conversation was going to be about. Let me explain, because you hit it. Like, it's
that's so what it's funny. About. We don't care about our marriages, our lives, our livelihood. They care about, can you secure this booty call,
right?
And can I do it the way I always do all my other booty calls, or approach people the way I always approach people, because this is my thing that I do.
But it's not even just that, because like once a person finds out in themselves that yes, they are attracted to trans people.
Oh, let's go there.
That's what I'm talking about.
Let's go there.
That's what I'm talking about.
Let's go there.
So I learned that I like whatever the idea of femininity is.
Yes.
That is something that I like. But that actually has nothing to do with if somebody was assigned male or female at birth. And it's something that shocked me to discover.
Correct.
But here's the thing. I was just kind of like, huh. Like, and I went on with my life.
Yeah.
But, you know, and coming to grips with that was interesting. I just happened to be, I happened to marry a woman that was assigned female at birth.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes fortunately and unfortunately didn't get a chance to kind of really explore that space. And I've talked to her about this before, but the meme, the thing that was blatantly transphobic was, it was a 35-year-old trans woman and an 18-year-old male that apparently couldn't tell the difference. And so went back to the hotel room in the apartment, learned the difference, left, got his gun, came back, and unfortunately shot the woman. Left, went back, shot her some more, and left again. What this person that I shared part of my childhood with said was, yeah, that's sort of understandable. And that's when I kind of lost it.
Yeah.
Because that was, and that's why one of the reasons you're here first. Like there are other people that I have slated to talk to, but I felt that in the wake of Black Lives Matter, specifically, we have to talk about Black LGBT. We have to talk about Black trans lives. And I am entirely too many spaces where I find myself at odds with other Black men that want to say, like, you know, they'll make distinctions about, okay, I'm fine with gay people and gay marriage or whatever, but trans people is a no-no. And I'm like, so tell me how that works, please.
Right.
Like what? So you're finally starting to understand the commonalities between struggles with gays and Black people, like, which is good for you. Yeah. Right. But you're not. Come on, man. Like
You're right here on the tip of it.
You're almost there.
How can you be so Black aware and still co-sign someone else's oppression?
Right. Because because Black people in America can think that we own the copyright on oppression, not understanding that there are minorities, classes all over the world that the old guard civil rights movement knew. They knew, and they talked to people. They talked to people in the Middle East. They talked to people in South America. They talked to everyone. And to strategize with struggles, to strategize. And it's not that like the LGBT community has been apart from like the Black community back then too. Right. Like a lot of them had, like, they were intersectional back then. They were vested interest in both of these things succeeding.
Yes.
Right. And I think that it's a lack of history and understanding what the movement was, like, apart from its leaders, apart from its messiahs, because we get preached Malcolm X and Martin Luther King so much that like we don't really go into like specifically the women of these movements and how open they were to the whole struggle, not just Blackness per se.
Yes.
So I leave the door open for you
to go which
wherever you want. Like how can we start to, okay, well, I'll start with a question. How can we start to bring about a greater awareness that the civil rights movement had was also the LGBT movement, and how we basically, the Black community at large, where did we fail our allies on the LGBT, us that are cis straight, like, how did we fail, and why did that happen? Why did that disconnect occur?
I think because culturally the focus was on the come up, right? The first thing that we wanted to do was try to sober people up from crack in the 80s. We wanted to educate our youth and get them in colleges, in the 90s. And we wanted to try to figure out some sense of social mobility first. That, I think, was one of the first objectives of the culture, so to speak, or at least looks like that's what major things happened. The LGBT movement, as people became to get educated, the experiences that they were faced with, I think, are the experiences of the majority. So the racism at the PWIs, particular ceiling situations, glass ceilings on jobs. So there was a common thing that people were experiencing across the culture that they could relate to, and they felt like, this was a thing that they could unite about to fight the power. But when it comes to the LGBT side of things, the culture as a whole is also deeply rooted in religion. And what the culture knows about LGBT things is that this is a sin and that we should hide this. So how do we stand strong in a fight to protect and uplift marginalized people when our spirit is told that we're supposed to be ashamed of this and that we are not supposed to promote this in any way? And I think that's where the intersection comes, because no one has really done that work. People are still regurgitating their great-great-granddaddy's religion. Some of them are not scholars or studying or really learning what it is, today and getting a clearer perspective from the information of the past. So without that bridge, I think people get stuck where they were left off.
Right.
I also do believe there is quite a bit of, I'll say fragility, but I don't want people to think that I believe all black men are fragile.
Right.
But there is a certain fragility, I think, sometimes that exists in the heteronormative relationship between black men and black women, that black men have to have a certain narrative about the way they are, and black women have to support that in order for them to thrive. And when they don't, it creates a cognitive dissonance that they don't know how to exist in. So to try to say that something else that's not born male or is a penis is also a man challenges their position. It challenges who they identify themselves to be, even though, you should know who you are as a person. But that's what tends to be the case, and people are threatened. That's the other part. So if I have to accept this person as a man, then what does that say about what I am as a man? Or why is it that this is acceptable when it goes against what I've been taught? So there's a lot of work to do and education that has to take place that I don't think people are interested in doing. It's much easier to fit into the collective narrative that this is wrong, or I don't believe in this, or I'm going to fight against this if I have a chance to politically, rather than just allowing people to live their lives, because that's the only rights we want. All we really want is, medical insurance,
right,
job security.
Right.
We're not out here fighting for whatever narratives the Republican platform constructs, conservative, black or white. Those aren't the objectives of our life.
Right.
So I don't know why those are the biggest parts of the narrative.
Using the bathroom.
Yeah, we just want to pee.
Right.
I just want to pee.
Yeah.
And I want to not pee in a place where I'm going to freak people out when I walk in, or be disgusted when I'm trying to do what I got to do.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Maybe I've mentioned this to you before, but it's not like mixed bathrooms don't exist.
Right.
I went to a wedding once, and I found myself in a situation where all you had were closed rooms with toilets and a shared sink, which means that men, women, everybody, like, I was washing my hands next to somebody that was fixing their makeup, and this was right during the HB2 thing. So I found myself sort of looking around me and thinking that it's so weird how no one is worried. Like, literally no one is worried. So, but you do hear of trans people getting the shit beat out of them by bigots. That's what you do, and by police, and when they get locked up, and all of this stuff. It's like, it's so strange how, even though there tends to be this perceived threat on society, like, the threat is actually towards people that just want to live their lives.
And you want to talk about a cat chasing its tail. Now you know why people are stealth. Not because they're trying to give you the big surprise behind closed doors, but for their safety.
And I'm sure that woman felt that she was safe in her apartment.
Right. It's about their safety. It's not about trying to fool anyone or any of that. It's about discerning Are you someone I can trust, with my information?
Right. No, that makes. You don't have to tell me. That makes all the sense. But we keep going back to the Bible.
Sure.
And so, how? Let's talk about God and concepts of maleness. Because I feel like it might be, because we talked about how we had a lot like a sin and all that stuff, but we didn't talk about how the Bible does express certain gender roles and talks and refers to God in the masculine and explicitly as a father and Christ as a husband and all of those things. And
yet we have Mother Nature, which is so sensitive and has such, also embodies different things that I think are feminine qualities.
But Mother Nature was almost a counter to the patriarchal system of the religion, right? You had forgive me, internet. Like you had like people, you had Wiccans, and you have all these other cultures and all these other religions that either worship nature or just wanted to commune with it and started to see more of a balance of energies between the sun and the moon, or the sun and the earth, and all of that stuff, and really understanding because now we're talking about the birth of gender roles. Really, we talk about the women being nurturers, as Mother Earth nurtures us and gives us its bounty, or her bounty, and the sun is this huge but distant. Like it's up there, we can see it, but even though we can touch and walk with the earth all the time, we literally can't touch our Father. Like, what the fuck?
Right.
And so we internalize all of these cultural narratives about the cold and distant loving God, but never says anything. Like the whole, like, you see what I'm saying? The whole, like, why is there suffering? You are literally all powerful daddy. And I'm telling you that I have a boo-boo and I'm crying, and you are in the other room with a beer. Like, you will literally not pick up your child. You are just like, I'm here. I love you, so I'm gonna teach you a lesson. Like, the pain is your lesson.
No, I don't believe that.
I know you don't, but that's my atheistic hat, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, but it's also the male archetype.
It is because people want to feel safe. They want to be protected, protected and provided for.
But it's funny that the male archetype, specifically of fatherhood, even through like the golden years of the 50s, where white people think that everything was kosher, or some white people, I don't want to say all, but there's that whole like greatest generation, leave it to Beaver bullshit. You still had a dad that came home that really didn't interact with the children too much, that expected food to be on the dinner table, did not want to be bothered because he spent all day at work.
That's right.
Even though the mom was taking care of the kids all day, even though the mom was cooking and cleaning, running errands, and probably hadn't actually sat down since the man left home, right? And that's the distant God archetype I'm talking about. Like, I think that the absent God that the atheists and even some Christians, like the whole, like the divine hiddenness argument of, like, the argument that you need to have faith because God works in mysterious ways. I feel like the Father in that time and culture also worked in mysterious ways in that sort of absentee sense, and only appeared when the family unit was in trouble that he could discern. Like, you only saw daddy when there was a problem. Right.
I think that's a big paradox from today, because we clearly have heard the voices of many women cry out that doesn't work, and having that type of structure is exhausting and draining, and it prevents them from having their own pursuits and their own fulfillment. So, I often struggle a lot of times with how people conceptualize God in a box. But my own cultural flavor, I grew up Baptist, I'm African American, and so I do like feeling safe and protected. And so I do speak to God as he is my father, but that is because that's the relationship that he and I have built. And it doesn't make him any less sensitive to me.
That's an interesting perspective.
I find
so you
him,
do see him gendered male.
I do see him gendered male, but I do see him as like this incredibly loving and sensitive, because he's so powerful, never really has to use his power kind of being.
That's so interesting, because it's like what you have in one sense is the ultimate divine trans male.
Yeah, completely.
I mean,
Completely. I do. And you know, in all of the facets, there's such a mixture of all the things. But you ask me what I conceptualize.
Right.
And when I pray, you know, maybe that's what I seek and counsel, is some type of a masculine wisdom. So maybe that's part of how that became to be. But
so the idea of gender still really intrigues me. Like you said, masculine wisdom. Like I don't know how to differentiate masculine wisdom from feminine wisdom.
I don't know either. I think it just kind of came out. But like, there's something, like you said, the perception of strength, the perception. And maybe it is a perception, but and I don't want to offend women by making the statement. And having lived a lot of my life, you know, as a woman, as a lesbian, I can share in this experience as being true for me. Emotionality sometimes is problematic.
Absolutely.
And I'm not going to say that men are not emotional. Of course, men are emotional. We see it all the time. But one of the things that I've experienced personally in my life and in my journey is that there's less steadfastness with me in female emotionality. There was more emotional shifting.
Okay.
Versus here I am now in month 5 on testosterone, and I feel much more grounded. I have the ability to kind of think through things before I respond and react, more so than I ever have before.
Wow, this comment section is going to be interesting.
I know it's going to piss people off, but I just have to speak my truth.
I understand that.
I have to speak my truth. You know, being 5 months on, I no longer experience a menstrual cycle, but my body, because I have not had a hysterectomy, my body still cycles. And so, you know, that week before the cycle, I still experience the bloat and some of the emotional topsy-turviness. But what used to be a 7 is now like a 2. And so I find that very interesting. And I don't know if that's a common thing for other people to experience, but I just know for me personally that emotionality sometimes can lead us to make unwise decisions.
So I don't want to push back against your personal experience, but at the same time, I want to sort of wade into those problematic waters.
Let's talk about it
a little bit, because
I just gendered some things.
Well, you not only did you gender some things, but you may have given some people that had some low-key sexist tendencies of some negative female stereotypes some ammunition.
I don't mean to, and I don't think all women are that way. I think there's a lot of women who possess emotional strength. I'm not saying that all women are just flighty and you know, emotional. I'm saying my experience, as I experience different situations in life and go through things, my experience has been a little different on testosterone as opposed to not.
Right.
And I have to say, for me, I feel more emotionally balanced as a person than I ever have.
And you like that.
And I like that feeling.
Not
this
to
is
say
what
that
I
there's
need.
any wrong with something other than that for someone else.
No, absolutely not. I think there's beauty in passion. I think it's amazing when people lean into the things that they feel and you know, are led by their passions. But like, if I'm in a crisis situation and I'm going through some things and I'm on my knees to God, I want to conceptualize and believe that I am praying to a God that is going to anchor where I am turbulent. And it doesn't have to be, I don't necessarily believe it's because he's a man. I think it's just because he's God.
Right.
But for me, that's the God I know. That's the God I've grown up knowing.
Right.
And I'm not trying to say that God couldn't be a woman for someone else. God could absolutely be a woman for someone else, or non-gendered for someone else, or, you know what I mean? But that's just how I relate to God. I believe that God has my back. I believe that God is very sarcastic with me. He has a huge sense of humor. I believe that God is very sensitive. Like when I am really in distress and I, get angry and fuss, he responds to me quickly. And I believe he's present. I believe his being is real. I don't know why I've always conceptualized him as a man, and that's just my experience.
I know why.
That's probably what I was taught.
Right. We talked about that a little bit, but we also talked about the Bible. So there's one question about this that still kind of bugs me to this day, because knowing what I know about the Bible, I don't see I'm not sure if you've noticed this, but there's sort of a push from the Black community away from, like, specifically woke Black people, like starting to push back against the Bible and Christianity a little bit more, specifically because it's like the religion of our oppressors, right? I didn't let go of it because of that. I let go of it because I don't think it makes sense. But I also understand why, if something is used as a device of control, why people would want to distance themselves from it. I want to know, absent a foundation in a text like the Bible, how do we justify a conception of God?
I mean, I think seeing the earth we live on is the biggest thing. We experience the awesomeness of, the ocean, or the beauty of these immaculately tall trees that grow, or the wind that we can feel that we can't even,
Let me be a little bit more clear.
Oh,
I'm not
my
saying,
bad.
I'm sorry.
My bad. I was thinking like.
I know, and I think that's beautiful. I am not attacking the idea of a God. Okay. I'm attacking the idea of a personal God.
Meaning somebody that I can talk to and he responds to me.
So let's say that someone did create all of this stuff, right? That doesn't mean that person is necessarily concerned with the day-to-day lives of human beings.
Oh, that's true. He may not be. But there's a way in which he seems to have his hand on us that would dictate otherwise.
How so?
Because there's certain things that just don't happen. I mean, we could be lucky. Yes, life can be lucky. But then there's some things that, we as individuals have a desire that's within us that only we know about, or only we have dared to dream about. And we try to think about what are the things that we could do to have that thing. And, a lot of times God will start to work those things out before you can even really get going on the second step of the journey to get there.